Once a month, across thousands of towns, emergency sirens wake up for scheduled tests. It's a predictable sound, one we're trained to ignore. This siren is the final link in a rigid technological chain. Orbital sensors monitor the atmosphere for falling pressure and rising wind speeds. When the data crosses a specific threshold, a human operator triggers the physical alarm. The act of warning a city requires a massive surge of industrial power. It takes an immense electrical load to physically spin the heavy metal rotors inside these units, churning the air into a scream. We trust these systems because they are bound by the known laws of physics. We assume that if the alarm sounds, a measurable physical storm is approaching our location. In Ash Hollow, the sirens broke that fundamental trust. The town's warning system began activating only when the sky was a perfect cloudless blue. The first 60-second activation happened in broad sunshine. With no wind and no clouds, residents dismissed the sound as a technical glitch, perhaps a short circuit in an aging control board. They replaced the controller, installed new wiring, even severed the grid connection. Yet exactly 30 days later, the sound returned. When investigators checked this meter after the event, they found a forensic impossibility. The dials showed 0 kilowatt-hours consumed while the siren was active. The utility company concluded that, mechanically, the machine had never turned on. A mechanical siren producing a 130 decibel wail without drawing electricity defies the conservation of energy. It suggests the sound wasn't generated by a spinning rotor, but was projected by something that bypassed the town's grid entirely. Modern meteorology acknowledges that animal biology often senses a storm before our hardware does. This graph shows the correlation. As barometric pressure begins to slip, animal agitation spikes as a defensive response. In Ash Hollow, that instinctual alarm triggered 3 weeks after the first siren. Every dog in the town suddenly began barking at a single, empty rock hill on the outskirts of the city. By sunset, the barking stopped. The town's dogs, the local birds, and even the insects vanished. No tracks were found, and no bodies were recovered. While the local biosphere was in a state of high alert, orbital weather satellites looking at Ash Hollow recorded nothing. There were no pressure changes and no atmospheric disturbances. The animals were reacting to an incoming force that our atmospheric instruments were unable to detect. Something was arriving that didn't move through the air like a storm. A meteorologist named Claire followed the animal's gaze to the hill. At the summit, she found a windowless concrete observation tower with a rusted ladder leading deep into the solid rock. Beneath the hill was a massive circular room. The walls were covered in weather maps that predicted future patterns with impossible accuracy, except for the map of Ash Hollow. That map was void of any geographical data. It contained only 3 words: waiting for arrival. At 3:17 p.m., the siren began again. The sound erupted from the stone itself, vibrating the concrete floors and walls with enough force to churn the dust into the air. As the vibration intensified, the ink on the maps began to move. Every city and state on the wall erased itself, leaving only Ash Hollow floating in an empty white void. Claire returned to the surface to find the town's physical infrastructure still functioning. Cars were idling at stoplights and sprinklers were watering lawns, but the people were gone. The event was surgically selective. It ignored the concrete and steel of the town, but every biological signature had been cleared away. The storm shelters remained intact, but they were empty. The official response to Claire's report was a diagnosis of mass hysteria. By framing her findings as a psychological break, the state could ignore the physical evidence of the town's disappearance. A systematic bureaucratic scrub followed. Highways were rerouted, and Ash Hollow was purged from every government record and map until it officially no longer existed. For the officials managing the aftermath, the priority was stability over understanding. When the existing laws of physics failed to explain the event, they simply removed the event from the record. 31 years later, a construction crew uncovered the buried tower and demolished it. They didn't know they were breaking the seal on the anomaly's focal point. At 3:17 p.m., every emergency siren within 50 miles activated in unison. Drivers pulled over in the bright afternoon sun, staring at a sky that remained perfectly clear. One boy looked out a car window and asked about the people standing in the clouds. His mother saw nothing,
But when she turned back, the boy's seat was empty. His seatbelt was still fastened. Every weather radar displayed a warning no human meteorologist issued. It was a direct, automated override. The radar's sweep arm illuminated the text in phosphor green, showing the system itself had identified the threat, a clear sky event. We have spent a century building sensors to look for storms in the atmosphere, but when the sky itself triggers the alarm, the very systems we built to save us are reduced to witnesses of our disappearance.